So welcome to another board game review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And today we're taking a look at a new, not war game, from Hollandspiele called Striking Flint. This is a 1 to 5 player cooperative game that covers the, it's the 1937 UAW sit-down strike in Flint, Michigan, which I knew nothing about prior to this game. So this is a cooperative game where you're acting as different factions.
They called them committees.
Committees,
Yep.
So like pre-unions, I don't really know. And it's sit-ins in the car factories, basically.
Well, it's like the United War Veterans of Flint and
Just the
rank and file, the Congress and Industrial Organization, Socialists, the Women's Emergency Brigade.
So it basically, you're organizations of different workers, and you're trying to work together to get concessions from the factory and its owners for better pay, better working conditions, all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure there's more details, maybe not. There's some bits and pieces in the rulebook, some like little asides and pieces of history, and there's some bits on the cards which were neat,
But the unique thing is this is a cooperative game. We were literally working together. We played the 2-player game, which required us to control 2 different committees apiece.
Yeah, it's a 4-player game split in half, basically.
And these guys have they have some of the same actions. They simply cost a little more exhaustion, which is kind of a resource you're trying to manage because it can lose you the game. But they also have some unique.
Yeah, everyone has one unique action, I think.
It was typically, like this one was Rouse, which was pretty cool. But the concept of working together to keep the factories
not working
clear and not working, keeping them clear of the different influences. They have like the police and the money changers and the scabs, and you're trying to keep all those guys out of the factories.
Yeah, you're trying to.
So they're not productive.
You're trying to keep like worker solidarity, keep everyone out, so that the strike can continue longer, so that the concessions come from the factory as you progress, as time goes on, and basically once those cross, the game ends and you've won if you can get that to go.
Well, and that concession, it starts at 40, or at least it did on our scenario here. But as you successfully clear the factories, it moves down. And when you defeat events, it also moves down. And you're trying to somewhat race up to meet it because that's your victory condition. You're trying to surpass that concessions marker. But it's a give and take, right? Because if you run out of exhaustion cubes, you lose the game. If you run too fast, somebody's going to run out of those exhausts. So you got to really kind of manage that.
Yeah, or if you're just doing a bunch of stuff and you let one of the different stacks of
exhaust
of guys come out, and there's only 5 in each. So if you let them run roughshod over the board, you'll lose that way as well, as you get strong-armed, basically. So mechanically, it's a great little co-op game.
It's worker placement.
Yeah.
We're putting guys out. And in essence, you're putting guys out to block these spaces so that when you roll the factory die, they don't activate. They don't activate when you have a guy sitting on them. And I'm telling you, some of those things are really bad.
Some are real bad.
Put out more guys, gain more exhaustion. Remember, that makes you lose the game. Both of those things. Eliminate your meeples. Oh my gosh, how many times did that happen where you're like, we need that guy. So trying to block those things was really kind of unique and cool. We weren't taking an action. We were blocking the factories from taking the action.
It's fun because we've played lots of worker placement games. We've played lots of worker displacement games. But I think this is my first one where it's like, I'm putting my workers out to not do anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they're going to go and sit, they're blocking this station in this factory literally so that nothing happens. Which is, it's a fun way of looking at that. And it's a neat kind of twist on that worker placement mechanic.
Yeah, but very clever design here. I think it was very interesting.
Yeah, well, and it works really well. It's very clean. It's 4 or 5 pages of rules at best. And it's about managing, okay, I want to have a couple guys on the board. We'll do some actions. I'll get some exhaustion.
Yeah.
But to get rid of that exhaustion, to put it back into the supply so you don't lose, you invariably, you're going to end up having to remove some guys from the board as well.
Yeah.
And so then it frees up more spaces, so more things can happen, and it's
a balance.
Yeah, and there's 4 different committees going, or however many you're playing with, and it's okay. I'm in a bit of a downside. I'm just going to do some resting and get guys back. Can you guys hold the fort down?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
no, yes. There's really neat give and take between that, and working together can be really helpful. And a lot of those unique actions help other players as well. Like it was, you give other people actions, I put someone else's meeple out, or I can kind of push guys away so that maybe we can.
This
take
was
some
kind of
advantage.
cool. The socialists had the rouse where it was expensive, but I could give every other committee an action. You still have to spend exhaustion, which was the balance that we kind of had to when I did that, but that's really powerful.
Yes.
Allowing other people to get rid of the money, the banking interest, and get the authority figures gone so that we could then clear those places. That was unique and interesting. I only used that once, but very powerful, and at the right time, really meaningful to the game and what you're trying to do.
And the events, you'll always have an active event, and it's usually very bad.
They suck.
And it's just something you have to deal with. Once you complete the conditions on it, you just discard it and get a new one, and that gives you new constraints.
Well, and that also gives you a concession, right? When you defeat those, you're moving that in-game timer closer to your guys, so it ends the game a little shorter.
And these are neat. Like, these have historical newspaper headlines and a little bit of the flavor text of what they actually did. So that was both like a neat little learning part of the game, but these were cool because the effects that they put into the game were quite varied. Sometimes it would place more guys out, and you had to get away from all of those guys, or kill them all. Not kill them, but get rid of them. And then it would go away. Or we had one where it was like, when you put guys out, you get extra exhaustion, and very quickly that was like, oh no. That was a big challenge. And so with those different kind of things that come up, you're looking for creative ways to deal with those. And that's where your little unique actions come in, and working cooperatively. It's like, okay, we have to solve this immediate problem whilst maintaining this overall kind of problem solving going on. And that was a fun little exercise, again, in a game that's 5 pages of rules.
Yeah, and played in about 45 minutes, right? The thing I also liked about it is, and I enjoy this about cooperative games, we're sitting here working together, trying to understand, okay, what do we need to accomplish? What is going to kill us? And that's always the immediate threat is, okay, we got to take care of this first. We call them law dogs, right? The authority stack is down low. We got to start getting police authority figures off the board, but then strategizing how that's going to work, and then couple that with, as you move along this track, when you hit your symbol, you're going to activate a factory action, which means roll a 6-sided die and then execute, I think, top to bottom, left to right.
I don't think there's an order in which
maybe
that's just what we were choosing to do.
Because it was systematic.
Yeah.
But these are bad effects from adding additional enemies on the board, giving you extra exhaustion, eliminating your guys. Those are not good things to happen because you took a lot of actions to get those guys out.
Yeah.
You took actions to try to minimize your exhaustion. So kind of doing that every round, you're hoping, oh, come on, roll a 1, and you do. And you can also block those. You can move your guys into those spaces, and then when those numbers are rolled, they don't go off. So that kind of ends up being a happy chance. But we had a lot of guys out at one point, and I felt like we were blocking a lot of their
You can
actions.
feel really good about it.
Yeah, then you lose them.
Well, then it's like, oh, we have to rest. Oh, no.
Yeah. Resting is also an interesting kind of interim.
Well, that's one of those things about all worker placement games, right? It's like you put all the guys out, and then you take them all back.
Yeah.
And that mechanic, good worker placement game is always interesting. There's always like a penalty for that, or something's going to happen. Or in this one, it's like, cool, I get rid of my exhaustion, but I get as much back as I have guys on the board.
Yep.
So do I just take all my guys off the board, get rid of all my exhaustion, and start fresh?
And the answer is probably no.
Leave one guy.
At least leave one guy. But I thought that was unique. I think the design space here really forced us to make a lot of really critical decisions.
Yeah.
And they go quickly. turns go very quickly, so you're making a lot of those.
Yeah.
I kind of felt exhausted after we had played this, because it's like we were thinking so much about what to do and how to do it. We also played the hard mode, right?
And there's no reason not to. There's an easy mode, but you can start with your hard mode, you'll be fine.
And I think the difference, we were looking at it, the difference is there are less icons that are going to trigger the roll of the die for the factory actions on the easy than the hard.
Which is that's half the fun of the game, is dealing with the...
I want this to be hard, right? And we felt like we were going to lose 3 or 4 times, and somehow we pulled it out.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the hallmark of a good cooperative game.
Yeah, and the map is just small. It's the 4 little cards, because we played the kind of 2, 4-player one. Those are random. You're going to turn them around. You're going to set it up. So your board setups will look different and have different kind of numbers and bits and pieces on them. So you get some neat variety in this game for every time you want to play it again with different groups as well.
You can play it solo. You're basically just controlling...
You just do it all,
all the factions, and so it's going to be a game that you can play solo, but I thought the fun in it is the cooperative aspect.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll show you how it works, and then we'll kind of wrap up with some final thoughts and kind of talk through some of that. So here's a look at the board, the playing area. Basically, you're going to have these cards, and there's I think 6 of them in the game, and depending on player count, you'll have a number of cards out, and you're going to kind of set them up in a square as best you can. So if there's only 3 players, and you're playing with 3 of these cards, you're going to kind of turn one of them this way, so it's as much of a square instead of having these weird shapes going on. That just helps kind of what the AI for the Union Busters basically is doing. But basically the way that this game works is that you're going to, in a turn, move your pieces by taking action. So you have these colored workers. So we have a blue, a gray, we have red, and I got these black ones over here. There's also a yellow faction that we did not use. So there's a little bit of variety if you want to kind of shake it up and mix and match the little factions. And what's going to happen is you take actions. Where's my little marker here? I stacked them all up. So everyone starts kind of over here, and what you're going to do is you're going to take actions, and those actions are literally this little menu right here. So you can either occupy, which is placing a guy out onto the board, or you can pick it, which means instead of placing in here, you're going to place out on what's called a corner. So these blue spaces are factory spaces, and all the blue ones that are adjacent are considered one location. So this is one factory. And so what you'll note is if you start kind of moving stuff around, you'll get different shapes, and that can be very important depending on what's going on. You might end up with factories that look like this. So you've got one big giant factory going on. Again, as you kind of play around and mix and match this. Sorry, it's hard to pick these up off of our flat floor, off of the flat table. So you can place your guys into the factories where they're literally like occupying those spaces, sitting in, no one else is producing anything in those factory spaces. Or you can picket, which is you picketing outside the factory, so you're occupying those spaces so that they can't generate as many of these bits and pieces that are going on. You can resist, which is a proactive action to remove these strike breakers, or you can or you then have this rouse or move or backdoor or combat. So that's the unique action that each faction has. And then the last one is this rest action, where you're going to reduce your exhaustion, which we'll talk about here in just a second. So you have a lot of similar things, but you also have a unique action. But within that, your costs for those actions, even if they're the same actions, have a different cost to them. So Occupy costs 2 exhaustion for this faction, but it only costs 1 for this faction, whereas it costs 3 for this faction. So there's asymmetry in the costs for things, and it's it's one of those things where these guys are very good at picketing and moving, So the course of a turn looks like the first player is going to take an action, and whatever action that is, you're going to say, we'll do the occupy action. We're going to place a worker on a station. Again, stations are the blue spaces. Multiple stations make up a factory. So we'll put one out, and that costs us 2 exhaustion. So we're going to take exhaustion from our exhaustion pool, 2 of them, and we put them on here. And then what happens is that the time track moves up 1, 2, 3 spaces because we have 3 exhaustion. So you can see the more exhaustion you collect, the faster you're going to run up the track. And why that's important is because every time, so this, these are the gray ones, not the black ones. Anyway, yeah, let me do that right here. We'll put a gray guy out. Sorry, I find they were a black symbol, but this is, okay. So the gray guy goes out there. The gray symbol goes 1, 2, 3. Every time you enter or cross through your color on here, you trigger like this kind of special factory event round, and you're going to have to roll dice, and you roll a little die, and so we'll roll a 5. And you look at every card, and you activate each 5 symbol. So 5, we get another exhaustion. Over here, we don't have a 5 on this card. Over here, the 5 puts out one of these security strike breakers. And again, if your pile of security strike breakers runs out, you lose the game. And over here, the 5 puts out one of these scabs. If your pile of scabs runs out, you lose the game. So racing through this, you put out a bunch of stuff, you get a bunch of exhaustion, you might lose workers. It can get really nasty, and you might end up losing the game that way. So you want to manage this, but the problem is that you also are trying to get this concessions down. So for every kind of turn where someone does something, you're going to check concessions. And so you look, and if you have 1, 2, at least 2 factories free of scabs or free of strike breakers, the concessions goes down 1. So here we've got this factory is free, this factory is not. This factory just got one, and this factory already has one here, so we don't get to go down. If this was not here, we could go down 1. And so you're trying to reduce this by keeping the factories clear, and then you're trying to get all of your markers of all of the groups equal to or greater than this. So you guys are moving up, but you're trying to do it such that this moves halfway down, and you kind of meet halfway. That way, it's a bit more manageable. So you're going to be picketing to put more guys out kind of here. When you're out here and you roll a 2, he blocks that from putting more out. So that's kind of why you'd be picketing. Resisting is removing adjacent strike breakers. And then you have special actions which kind of break lots of rules or allow other players to kind of jump on in. Or you can rest, and rest is one of the really interesting parts of this game. So when you rest, you return all of your cubes to the supply. So I've got 4, we're going to put them all back. And then you can remove any number of your workers from the board, and this action costs 1 exhaustion per guy on the map. So you're like, oh, I want to leave all my guys out. Well, guess what? You get 3 of these back, you only reduced a net 1. It probably wasn't even worth doing that. So you remove a couple because we've got a guy there. This one's maybe less important because we cleared everything off. Now it's only 1. So we kept 1 guy out. So judging when to do that's really important. You're moving up here, and you also have these events. You'll have one of these face up, and every time the factory activities phase is gone each time the factory activates from an even-numbered space, you add more of these kind of strike breakers out there, which is really, really bad. So the events, you're trying to kind of complete those, and you remove them if there's none of these different strike breakers in play. So you're trying to complete those because the punishments on those are really severe. But that's really what the game is. There's 4 of you in a 4-player game. You're just trying to manage these. They're going to be appearing and then moving in to try and arrest you, clog up your stuff so you can't do a whole lot, or you get lots of exhaustion, and then you're triggering more factories, which means more strike breakers come, and then that's going to escalate very quickly. But that's kind of how that looks. But it's a really, really good system. It's very clean, it's very easy, especially for a little worker placement game, and it plays quickly. But what we'll do is we'll wrap up here with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at how the board works. when it comes to doing these co-ops, the talking through of the stuff is one of my favorite parts of it.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You know, it's because I might not have considered a consequence of something. If I move here, it's easy for them to jump in like, oh, if you do that, this is the knock-on effect. Like, whoops, I hadn't considered that, and I
Yeah.
would have screwed us all over. So I really like that part of it, but the puzzle and the challenge has to be difficult or complex enough to allow that.
Yeah.
And this one the margins are very small.
Yep.
With either your exhaustion cubes, because you've got a lot of exhaustion, or your strike breakers, which there's not many, and if you get a lot of those on the board, it's razor thin, and so your decisions are really tough and meaningful.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
Which I really like, and so then that becomes valuable. Talking through everything.
Well, and I also think John Dubois did a really good job in marrying the historical happening with the theme and the mechanics to create, you know, I felt like in many ways we were doing what historically they were doing. And that's interesting when a game can make me feel that way and feel connected to it. I read a couple of the event bottoms, and you learn, right? You also learn from these style of games, and I think that's cool. You also played Heading Forward,
yes,
which was John's, I think, debut game, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken. Obviously, totally different style of game.
Yeah, it's funny. They share almost nothing in common.
Okay.
And I think the only hallmark that you could say between the two of those games is that they are unique, especially thematically.
Sure.
Because that's a solitaire game that's based on recovering from like a traumatic head injury. And it's really, really cool. Mm-hmm. You've never done anything quite like it. But I don't see much of that here.
Mechanically. Got it. Well, I was asking because I didn't get a chance to play Heading Forward.
It's a neat game. It's very difficult.
Yeah. Well, isn't that what you want typically?
Yes.
Even
yes,
these
it is.
cooperative games, I want it to be challenging. I don't want to walk through it. And actually, I'm surprised that we won that one, but
yeah, it was tense there for a bit. That's
we
for
just
sure.
did what we needed to do at the right times and squeaked by. So
Yeah, it was funny. We kept, for those factory rolls, we would roll ones a lot and fives a lot, it felt like.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my gosh, can we stop?
yeah, isn't that the way a lot of these kind of games are? Though I remember back to my Catan days, right, when I played with friends and family. How many times did you have the best number, an 8 or a 9, and it just never rolled? And ones and 11s were rolled all the time.
Can we stop rolling 11s? Can we just roll the 7, please?
And that's going to be the case here. Sometimes the dice are just going to, it's random, right? You're just going to keep seeing the same numbers sometimes. Some other games, you're going to see a wide range of those
Or we
numbers.
were incredibly unlucky where we spent a long time completing one event and we drew the same event again. It was like,
and that was one thing I was going to look through the deck. I'm assuming there's a couple that are similar or along the same theme,
effects.
but that one actually had the same effect, which was
like,
interesting.
oh, gosh.
Just a different
It
title.
had been so difficult to do it.
And there's a bunch of these. I mean, what is that about? 25 cards?
And if you're playing
event cards?
the kind of the hard mode, which is what I would recommend, you're gonna play
go
through 3 or 4 of
2 or
those.
3 at the most,
You won't see close to all of those in a game.
So that is interesting. Yeah, these were. This was very different than I thought it was going to be as we were looking at the rules. But I liked the way it turned out. I thought it added a nice kind of.
And they say, if you want it to be even harder, you can play with like 2 events going at once.
No, thank you.
Trust me.
You can try it, but
you
my
never
goodness.
win. Those were so difficult to contend with. They became a massive focus of what you're doing.
Well, that reminded me, totally another solo game, but the Valiant Defense series from David Thompson and DVG, they have those tactics cards.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the way you make the game more difficult. You add those in. They're just as hard as these were. And just... I want it to be a challenge. I don't necessarily want to defeat my spirit every single game and be like, I'm not going to play
I want
that
it to
again.
be like more than a 2% chance of victory.
Yeah, right. Maybe 3.
I don't want it to be 50% chance of victory, but more than 2.
Yeah, that's... The rules. I think we read the rules and worked through the rules. They probably, in my opinion, needed a little bit of clarity. particularly the differentiation between stations and corners, although it's not hard. For some reason, I just struggled with that. Well, it's 6 pages of rules, right? It's not...
And really, like, it's like really...
And once you play it,
and stuff.
I think once you play it, you start, oh, that's what that kind of meant. And isn't that kind of the way a lot of games are until contextually you get it?
Each individual thing that you do is not complex.
Right.
And when you bring it all together, you just like want to make sure that the interplay and the timing of stuff works.
Yeah.
And then the player turn where they kind of like do this, then this, then this. It's like, okay, not bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, Striking Flint from Hollandspiele, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, very enjoyable game.
Not what we usually play.
Nope.
At least that you see on the channel. But I had a great time with this, and I would recommend this to groups of people who like worker placement games and want something that doesn't take 3 hours. Because I'll be honest, 3 hours of worker placement, not for me.
If this was a 3-hour game, I might not have liked it as much. But because it was 40 to 45 minutes, I'm like, man, that hit the sweet spot. And felt appropriate. Right?
I agree. It did a lot in the package that it is and in the time constraints that it had.
But I do like a very small footprint. There's not a lot of components. This is kind of a travel game, although it's in one of their normal boxes. But you could put this in a baggie because it's all cards. The only big component is the board, and you could travel with this and play this with the wife or the kids, and I love that about these style of games, and particularly a historical setting like this is.
And they don't give you a D6, but you only need 1.
Right. For some reason, I thought we needed more, but
no.
But yeah, an enjoyable game. I would play it again in a heartbeat, and had a good time with it.
Yeah, so check this out if you're interested, but appreciate you very much for tuning in. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.
And I'm Grant.